Let's just start where Ackerman Road. First of all, let's look at the urban landscape has changed at least twice since the war. Prior to 1960 at least, Ackerman Road, just before Eyethorne Road here, Ackerman Road did a dogleg round to the left, and it basically cut an angle through these buildings, which weren't here of course, up to a road called Treeherne Road, which I don't think exists now. So Ackerman Road basically bent round to the left as we walked down, and Lothian Road basically bent down to the right and met at a T-junction just about at the end of this building. So those buildings over on my right, those of course didn't exist. Lothian Road would have come through basically, what is that, where you see a junction in that building, and Ackerman Road was bending round to the left to form a T-junction. This would have been about the corner where Lothian Road met Ackerman Road. Ackerman Road continuing around that direction, basically where we're looking at west, I suppose, and Lothian Road this direction, and about here would have been a pub called the Carlton. There'll be the pub, there's a little bit of space between the Carlton, and then you had 110 and 112 Lothian Road. 110 would have stood roughly where that hedge is. So that would have been 110, 112, the Carlton junction with Ackerman Road. This now continues as Ackerman Road, but as I say, it used to be, looking at, and I'll put up the Ordnance Survey maps that show it. There was two prefabs here, and these prefabs were placed on an area that was bombed by Luftminen, which was a parachute mine, roughly about, I think, about 1,000 kilos of explosive, massive explosives. They will float to the ground at about 40 miles an hour, and once hitting the ground it would activate a clockwork mechanism that would then explode the fuse or ignite the fuse. If it fell in water, which was what they were originally designed for, then there would be a dissolvable plug that would deactivate the clockwork mechanism, and the mine would just lie in water waiting for a metal hulled ship to pass above, where the magnetic interaction would explode the mine, with not very happy results for the ship above. Now, I mentioned the word prefab. I realised about 15 years ago that a lot of people now don't know what prefab means. Okay, prefab stands for prefabricated building. After the war, there was a huge housing crisis in Britain. We'd been bombed and bombed remorselessly, and the housing crisis resulted in land being cleared of rubble, bombed areas being cleared of rubble, and buildings that was pre-made in a factory, prefabricated in a factory. There was 4 different types. We first followed the American type, which had been invented in America, but the type that became most common, and about of 130,000 made, about 60,000 were used in London. Goodness me, the asbestos concrete variety. They were basically asbestos concrete sheet walls, steel windows, a felt roof on top. They were flat roofed. They would have an open flame fire that would heat the living room, Behind the fire was a back boiler, and behind the back boiler was an airing cupboard. And they burned coal, of course, as everything in London, everything in England burned coal, because coal was cheap. Now, just to get back to the urban landscape as I walk along, roughly about this point you had a house that had withstood the blast of the Luftminen, and at about this point you had Petit's Sweet Shop, run by Mrs. Petit, her daughter Gertie, and her tragic son Eddie Petit. I say tragic because this is what it was like 75 years ago, to be brought up as an immediate post-war child. Eddie Petit had suffered during the war. He apparently had a brilliant mind. He was a scientist. He'd been damaged by blast. His mind had been destroyed, and he'd walk up and down the street and up and down Elliot Road, which we're coming to, just mumbling to himself, talking to himself, but rather have sympathy and care. All he got, especially off toe rags like me, was kids following him up and down the street, taking the mickey out of him. That's one of the tragedies of war, that we become brutalized. Because there are so many casualties, because so many people get hurt by war, they become brutalized. We don't count the casualties anymore. If just take this area, if a bomb went off and killed 30 people, it'd be national news. I can't find any record anywhere of that mine that probably killed around 30 people ever being reported anywhere. And that's what war does. We're all affected by it, so we all take notice. This is still Ackerman Road. As I say, it used to be Lothian Road up to about there. And here there used to be a street called Elliot Road, and this formed one side of the trapezoid block that was formed the other side by Ackerman Road. Now Elliot Road has all but disappeared. On the corner here there was a grocer's shop called Rolf's. Mr. Rolf, I didn't like Mr. Rolf. He spent a lot of time trying to get me into all sorts of trouble. So I'm going to walk down now what was Elliot Road to where Treeherne Road used to be. This is now called Winterslow Road, and it forms a little estate. There's about, if I look at the Ordnance Survey map, there was about, I think about 12 dwellings down here. In 1947 these dwellings would be Victorian terraced houses, flight of stairs going up, a basement underneath the flight of stairs. The houses 2 or 3 stories high, often housing more than one family. Brick built to last forever, but sadly they weren't allowed to. I say sadly, there were grim places. I'm sure these are far more efficient, nicer places to live in. Talking about a prefab, we had at 110 Lothian Road, we had quite a long garden. In fact, it's quite an enormous plot. If I actually look on the map, it's one of the biggest plots in this trapezoid block. And the back of our prefab, the back garden, used to extend to what was, I think it was 53 or 43, which would be about here. And this would be the end of our back garden. And then our back garden then had a wall that paralleled Elliot Road. And as a kid I used to climb on that wall, and I could cat crawl all the way down to what used to be the hygienic dairies, which sat on the corner of Treeherne Road and Elliot Road. Treeherne Road finishing at Elliot Road. and it would be just about where this square is here.
Right.
Good afternoon. I'm talking to myself.
No, you're talking understood.
Thank you. And this would have been Treeburn Road. There would have been a T-junction. Elliott Road had a dogleg now round to the left and up. Carter's Sweet Shop, roughly where the Millennium Pharmacy is, over there. So let's carry on, shall we? There would have been about 6 dwellings along this side. This would have been the dairy. That side of Elliott Road, there would have lived almost opposite the dairy, just to my left. There would have been the family that 2 sisters that my sister beat up for me. Thank you, Barbara. When I was about 7 or 8, they were beating me up, and she came out and beat them up. Excellent. Well done, Barb. And this is Navarre Road now. Obviously somebody's read their history of the Peninsular Wars. Anyway, that's Navarre Road. And just about where this corner stands here, probably a little bit further, that would have been the junction with Ackerman Road as it bent round, because now it's been straightened up to become the top half of what was Lothian Road. I'm not going to go down there. So this roughly, I would have said probably about where this corner is. This would have been the corner with Ackerman Road. It's now called Henry Road. Goodness, they'd named it after my grandson. It's now Cromwell Road. This is sort of cutting across where Elliott Road is.
Just walking back towards Elliott Road and beyond Elliott Road.
I don't know what street this is, but this looks as though the landscape hasn't been changed up very much. I wonder if this is Patmos Road. No, it won't be Patmos Road because we've not got to Foxley Road yet. Oh right, there in front of us is the Church of St. John the Divine, which 75 years ago is where I was christened. So therefore this must be, I think, the old Patmos Road, and that must be Lothian Road, if it's still called Lothian Road, or whether it continues as Ackerman Road, I don't know. And there's Myatt Road. Well, we'll talk about Myatt later on. So now we're going to the Church of St. John the Divine. It still looks as grim as it did when I was here. And not a lot of bomb damage around this area, more when you get to the Oval and more when we continue down Lothian Road. St. John the Divine, and the road that we're coming to used to be called Frederick Crescent. And believe it or not, there's a sign over there that says Frederick Crescent. So this used to be Frederick Crescent. That used to bend round. And this is Patmos Road. It used to be called Bishop's Road when the old houses was first built here. That was Bishop's Road. When it was changed to Patmos, I don't know, but by 1947 it was very well entrenched as Patmos Road. And this must be Foxley Road that we are coming to here. This is pretty well unchanged. Over on the corner there used to be a pub called the Foxley, which was my dad's boozer. He never went to the Carlton, that was about 30 yards away. He instead went to there, and that's Vassal Road. Pretty much unchanged now as it used to be, but there's another road I'm looking for that came before Vassal Road, and basically it was the top end of Elliott Road. I think this must be where it is, down this little new road here. That road used to be called Cancel Road. Foxley Square, Blimey, that's all new. I think this bit that we're seeing here, this road in front, that used to be the old Elliot Road. So Cancel Road would have ended here. I bet this must be Cancel Road that we're coming to now. Cancel Road would have ended here. Elliot Road would have continued up to Vassal Road. St John the Divine there. This would be Cancel Road. Oh look, and it is Cancel Road. And down the Cancel Road, it's my mum used to take two small kids from where we saw at Lothian Road, where the Camberwell submarine is, up Elliot Road, which is roughly about where that pin is, down here, and what looks to be modern flat top buildings now. Used to be what looked like a Victorian workhouse, but was in fact Christchurch Primary School. This is Cowley Road, and there used to be a school here. It was a Catholic school. Not that there was any particular angst between Catholics and Protestants in this part of London. Never was, but Christchurch of course was Protestant, and Cowley Road was Catholic. Now you see, this is the bit I really love. This is what I've said on other parts of London about how green it is. I'm going to pan this round so you get the size of this green. It's quite large. I could certainly walk my dog on it, and the dog will be tired after walking around it. It's now called Einthorn Park. A bit bleak. They could have done a few more trees, I think. But the amazing thing is, two redevelopments since I was a kid, and it's added more green space, because this never existed in 1947. It's actually added more green space as they've redeveloped, not taken it away, because I know Myatt's Park is now bigger than what it was. But I think that is an amazing thing, you know, when we think of redevelopments as gobbling up green space to be replaced with grey slabs of concrete. They've actually added here, not taken away. And this is roughly round about where Cowley School would have been, at the end of this block. You have some fairly grim places down here. No wonder they were knocked down, but look at this green that's just been added. Space made and added. Of course the buildings are taller, you know. From a single story prefab we've gone to all of this. All these traffic calming measures. Of course when we were kids living around here, you never needed them. Nobody had a car. And now we're coming to what looks to be a community centre. Well, this certainly is changed. Has it changed for the better? Well, I was very happy in the prefab. We had a nice big garden. It was on one floor. We used to play games with my dad, jumping in and out of the windows. You can think of some very nice things go on here. I remember when we moved, they still had the old milkman with the electric milk float, and my dad helping the removal men and me helping dad, and then all of us, the milk float went by, we stopped the milk float. Oh, Crochet Road, that brings back a bell as well. But of course it goes in a different direction to what it used to do. And we stopped the milk float, we grabbed pints of milk off it, and sat there drinking pints of milk. I think let's get back to Lothian Road. This is just these green spaces, quite clean. I was very disappointed when I walked down Patmos Road at how filthy it was, the rubbish in the street. Signs of people not respecting where they live, not being given the reason to respect it probably. Because I think we all want to live in clean places. Look at this, this is lovely. Mind you, we had adventure playgrounds in my time, but I'll come to that. Down the new road, well, I call it new road, certainly wasn't here in 1947. This is the back of Council Road School. As I remember, the school playground backed onto a wall which formed the boundary of houses that ran down to Treherne Road. So we're roughly, so all these houses are new, that road's new, that I've just come down. So we must be coming back to where roughly where Elliot Road met Treherne Road. Very annoying they've taken the Treherne Road away. It's a good point for me because it formed the base of the trapezoid. Here we go again. Let's just wander down. This is Cromwell Road. We've seen this before because it leads down to Patmos Road down there. I must admit I can't fault the urban planning here. These are lovely little low-rise, some a bit taller, parking places, trouble-free streets, traffic-free rather. A very nice piece of urban planning. Right, here we go. This is for all you millennials that seem to have the idea that us baby boomers destroyed the planet. We've left you with this legacy of overpriced housing and global warming. Well, it is true that, okay, let's take 1947, let's go to where 110 Lothian Road was. I was born at home. It's a Thursday. Two houses on a building site. There's a bomb site. We lived in a prefab with an open fire. We had no central heating, no insulation. In the winter, quite commonly, the bedroom that I shared with my sister would have ice on the windows. That wasn't unusual. We were fortunate that we had a big back garden, but that was more down to the Luftwaffe than it was to any form of urban planning. When I first went to school, I had one pair of shoes. That was it. No trainers, no going out shoes, no coming home shoes, no school shoes, no school shoes, no nothing. One pair of shoes. All my clothes were either knitted by my mum, or they were hand-me-downs that had been repaired, darned. Socks were darned, everything was darned. That was the limit of our clothes. It was probably about just one change. No choice, no colour, no nothing. You just had what you could get. There was no television. I think we might have had a radio, but there was no television. There's no mobile phones, no computers. And when you think about how much coal we burnt on our fire, the emissions from that probably wouldn't quite be a fraction of the emissions that 20 mobile phones cause in the amount of energy that they need, especially if you use the cloud, because the cloud needs a small power station to power it. So when you download things from the cloud, just think of places like Virginia in America, where they have the biggest cloud servers, and it'll take a small nuclear power station to supply it with all its energy. So we had none of that. Cars, we had none. I used to play in this street quite happily. Nobody worried about where I was. And when I think that I was about 9, and I was playing over in the docks by Tower Bridge, and I used to walk there and walk back. There was no scooters. My mum, when I went to school, she'd leave home, she'd take me to school, she'd leg it to Freeman's, where she worked as a part-time filing clerk. She'd work flat out till 2 o'clock, then without even having time for a cup of tea, she'd run home and pick me up from school. There was no school run. There was nobody picking me up by car. Whatever the weather, rain, snow, wind, whatever the weather, my mum would have to walk me there and walk me back. Nobody had cars. There was no car pollution in my day. Not, you know, when you talk about baby boomers wrecking life for you, go and count the number of cars that's in the street now. That's why I tend to walk everywhere. You know, when I was a kid, my number one means of transport was what the army would call the number one personnel carrier. The feet at the end of your legs. Food. We didn't have supermarkets, big supermarkets, that we drove to, of course, that required big car parks. When Rolfs became David Gregg's, which then became Sainsbury's, we used to go to David Gregg's for what we want. We paid through the nose for it. But you managed. You know, we saw chicken about once a month. We saw roast beef about the same. There's no instant foods, there's no prepared foods, there's no pastas, no pasta sauces, no Taste of India's, no takeaways, no restaurants. It was just get what you can. And so my mum walked me to school, dash off to Freeman's, dash back from Freeman's, pick me up from school, walk me home. We'll then have to start peeling potatoes or washing clothes. Now when it came to washing clothes, of course, which uses a lot of energy, I'm sure we all have dryers and stuff like that that uses massive energy. But when my mum washed clothes, she washed them by hand, and she had soap, not detergent. She had soap flakes, and she washed by hand, no washing machine, and she wrung them out with a hand wringer, one of those things with 2 rollers. She wrung them out and she hung them up over the fire or in the airing cupboard or wherever she could to get them dry. If it was summer, she could have a clothesline outside.